My name is Brooke Rollins, and it isn't often I get to be here for our primer series, but I think this one was certainly special, and we are so excited to be partnering with the Libra Initiative and Daniel Garza and his incredible team, as well as our friends from Dallas at the O'Neill Center at SMU, who are going to be, you'll hear some great remarks from one of their great staffers today. Bob Lawson, I know, is with us, their director. So on behalf of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, as well as these two other fabulous organizations, we want to welcome you today. In 1981, Margaret Thatcher gave an interview, and for those of you who did a lot of TPPF events, we quote a lot of Margaret Thatcher here, but she gave an interview to the Sunday Times in which she reflected on where Britain had been and where she wanted to take it. She said this, 1981, "What's irritated me about the whole direction of politics in the last 30 years is that it's always been towards collectivist society. People have forgotten about the personal society, and they say, do I count? Do I matter?" And to which the short answer, Margaret Thatcher said, is yes. And therefore, it isn't that I set out on economic policies, it's that I set out to really change the approach. And changing the economics is the means of changing that approach. If you change the approach, you really are after the heart and soul of the nation. Economics are the method. The object is to change the heart and the soul. Thatcher understood the basic truths of her mission and the mission of all her colleagues in governance, that policy is about people, that ideas have consequences, and that the real battleground is not the electoral map, but it is the human heart. At the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and I would say along with our partners today, our work is predicated on these truths, that we affirm the dignity of the individual, we believe that every life counts, and we strive to open the doors of opportunity and liberty because of those lives and their dignity. The discussion today is just one example of the many ways in which we seek to create and sustain the ongoing conversation that is the foundation of our democratic life. The men and women gathered here do not agree on everything, but today you're going to hear a little bit more on how they disagree. That's what we like to do, make it fun. But they agree on one big thing, that our future and the future of our neighbors, our communities, and our children, that future is too important to leave undiscussed, unaddressed, and unexamined. And that's why we discuss and debate economic freedom today, not because economics matter for their own sake, but because they matter for the people that they affect. We are in the business, as Thatcher said 35 years ago, of changing the heart and the soul. So I thank you for being here. I want to ask Chuck DeVore, our Vice President of National Initiatives at TPPF. Of course, everyone knows Chuck served in the California Assembly from 2004 to 2010. There he was the Vice Chairman of the Assembly Committee on Revenue and Taxation and on the Budget Committee. I'm so sorry, Chuck, in California. That was a tough load. Also served as a Reagan White House appointee in the Pentagon from 86 to 88. Please help me welcome our Vice President of National Initiatives, Chuck DeVore.
Thank you, Brooke. Well, welcome everybody to today's primer, Economic Freedom versus Government, which provides the best opportunity for prosperity. You're probably going to hear a few different approaches today from the panelists, a very wide range of experience and background, and I think you're going to find them most compelling. In my own research on the topic over the last couple of years, which I've been very honored to have the opportunity to just kind of explore where the data takes us on this topic, one of the things that I found that really shocked me was that the official poverty rate used by the U.S. Census Bureau is bogus. The thing is completely bogus. Why is it so wrong? Well, what the official poverty level does, which has been around for over 50 years now, is it doesn't take into account the cost of living differences across the country. It assumes that the cost of living in Brooklyn is the same as it is in Lubbock, Texas. That is patently ridiculous. The rents between, as you know, of course, with Brooklyn, the rent is too damn high, right? And so that alone causes a wide range in the cost of living across the country. And because the official poverty rate does not take that into account in lower cost areas like the Midwest and much of the South, excluding Florida, in low cost areas, the poverty rate is artificially inflated because people need less money for food and rent and other basics. Whereas on the coast, and primarily up in New England, the cost of living is significantly higher, by some measures 30 to 40% more than in states like Texas. And yet the official poverty measure does not take that into account. Now, the other thing it doesn't account for, which is fascinating, are certain benefits like rental subsidies, Section 8 housing vouchers, what used to be called food stamps, or now SNAP, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. Those benefits are not considered cash benefits, and you see the official poverty rate only considers cash earnings and cash benefits from government, not in kind. And so the U.S. Census Bureau, after about 20 years of effort, developed a different version of the poverty measure. And the version is called the supplemental measure of poverty. And by that measure, Texas is actually at the national average. Texas is actually at the national average. And so that ought to color the discussion about poverty when you think of which places in America provide for the best standard of living for all of their people. And we're going to hear some of that discussion today coming from different angles. First, we're going to hear from Dean Stansel. Now, Dean is probably the newest Texan of the people who have moved to Texas. He was recruited to Texas from Florida, where he is now the research associate professor at the O'Neill Center for Global Markets and Freedom at SMU. He has produced over 60 publications on fiscal policy issues at the Cato Institute in Washington, D.C. He's the author of the Economic Freedom of North America Annual Report, which, by the way, the Texas Public Policy Foundation is proud to be a partner in producing that report. He is the sole author of the Economic Freedom Index for U.S. metropolitan areas. His academic publications and op-eds have appeared in the New York Times, Investor's Business Daily, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, and of course many, many others. He earned his PhD and MA in economics from George Mason University in Virginia, and his BA in economics and politics from Wake Forest University. Ladies and gentlemen, Dean Stansel.
Thanks a lot, Chuck. And we also want to thank you, the Texas Public Policy Foundation, for hosting this great event and for partnering with us on the Economic Freedom North America Report. More on that in a minute. So they told me I've got 12 minutes, so I'm not going to try to make you laugh with a joke. It probably wouldn't have worked anyway. I'm going to dive right into economic freedom. Going to talk a little bit about what it means when we say economic freedom, what we're talking about, how we measure it a little bit, and of course why it matters. We wouldn't be here if it didn't matter. First, a quick commercial for my new employer, the O'Neill Center. William J. O'Neill and his wife Faye started this center back in 2008 with a generous donation, and they continue to be big supporters of us. William O'Neill founded Investor's Business Daily, my favorite newspaper, and at the age of 30, he bought a seat on the New York Stock Exchange. He was the youngest at that time ever to do so. So it's we're expanding. We're hiring a new research assistant to help work with me, actually. So if you know someone who might be interested, feel free to talk with me afterwards. But we're looking forward to a great partnership here with the folks at TPPF as we move forward. All right, so a couple years ago, I got involved with what's called the Economic Freedom of North America Report. And this is put out by the Fraser Institute in Canada. It's a think tank up there that's been doing these things for a long time. My boss here, Bob Lawson, works with the Economic Freedom of the World that Fraser publishes on the countries. Limited time here, I'm not going to talk about that, but they've been doing great work for years. This was first published about 14 years ago. The most recent report was the 11th edition. It came out just in December. We've got the Mexican states included. One of my co-authors, Jose, is here to share with you some stories about that part of the initiative. I've been the primary author on the last 3 editions of this report. A little bit about the impact. We have gotten over 500 media mentions, in part due to the great work of Chuck and others at the TPPF and other think tanks around the country. We're starting up a network of state think tanks, and it's been really helpful for us in getting media mentions and getting attention to this important work. But it's also getting attention in academia. There have been over 130 journal articles by professors looking at what economic freedom relates to in terms of things like growth and income levels and that sort of thing. There are a couple other state indices. Ours is the best. It's been produced the longest. It's the only one that's updated annually. It has the most years of data. Now it's a work in progress. It could use some improvements, as everything can. So the textbook definition, per se, of economic freedom comes from the Economic Freedom of the World report that I mentioned. I like to think of it simply as the ability of individuals, entrepreneurs, families, business people, to do as they want with their time and resources without excessive intervention by government. There's a longer version up there. But ultimately, on the economic freedom side, we're looking at the economic component of our behavior and leaving aside, not because it's unimportant, but because in some ways it's harder to measure, the personal freedom side. There are other indices that look at that. So I tried to squeeze a lot on this slide, apparently. There are three areas here, and I'm not going to go into too much detail given that it's a short talk today, but we look first at government spending. We look at a couple different slices of the government spending pie to see how much the burden of government spending is in each state. We do the same thing with taxes. That we put an extra emphasis on income taxes because income taxes tend to be more harmful to the economy. They tend to punish productive activity. And so we've got one that looks at the rates and one that looks at the revenues. And then the other two variables at the bottom capture the rest of the tax revenue pie. So it's all in there. It's just sliced up in a couple different pieces. And then area 3, we look at labor market freedom. So we look at the minimum wage and how burdensome it is compared to the local economy, or sorry, the state economy. So in states where income is higher, the same minimum wage would be a little less burdensome compared to a state where income is lower. And then we look at the number of bureaucrats essentially as a percentage of the workforce and union density as well. Throw all that onto the computer, scale them 0 to 10. So the one with them, we're basically grading on a curve, by the way. The one that comes out as most free gets a 10, even though they're not what we'd call perfect freedom. And so otherwise everyone would get an F, but when we do grade, we do grade on a curve, and each variable is equally weighted across within each area to try to avoid any sort of subjective opinions being thrown in there. And then we just average the scores in area 1, 2, and 3 to come up with a 0 to 10 score. And this is what it looks like for the most recent report, where blue is most free, red is least free, light blue is second, green's in the middle, and orange is second least free or fourth most free. You can see there Texas is in blue, no surprise I suppose, and California and New York are in red, also probably not a surprise, or it shouldn't be. Vance again and I had a piece in Real Clear Policy this morning that actually made that point about how if you look at the 4 biggest states, throw Florida in there, there's a real contrast between not only the level of economic freedom in these places, where Texas and Florida are highly free, but also in the economic prosperity of those places. The red, in this case, red states, not free states, are have a lot slower growing economies. So this just shows you over time what the data looks like. We go back to 1981, and there was a general upward trend, and then we started down, and now we're back up again. It's overall we're freer than we were back in 1981, but not as free as we were in around 2000 or so. Texas specifically is third. If you just look at the largest states, they're first, but there's 2 states ahead, New Hampshire and South Dakota. They've been in the top 3 for 7 of the last 8 years. So this just plots Texas versus the US average. It's basically the same picture, about 1 point on our scale higher. Texas has largely followed the trend, but has been way ahead of the US average, of course. All right, so area 1, Texas ranks 4th. So of course the good story is Texas is right up there at the top, and the other side of that is, well, there's always room for improvement. So Texas ranks 4th on the variable, the first variable there, the 3rd, 2nd, 12th. So their worst one is where we look at insurance and retirement payments, where they're at 1.7% of income. So there's some room for potential improvement there. On taxes, well, no income tax is a wonderful benefit for Texans, and that puts them first for the income tax variable on the rate at least, and where they then have some downfall, of course, if you've got the best with zero income tax revenue, well, you got to get your revenue from somewhere. So when we look at property and other tax revenue, and that one, I believe includes the margins tax that Vance and I were talking about yesterday, Texas ranks 37th. So a lot of room for improvement there. On sales tax, same thing, 37th. Now, of course, you could spin that as well. We don't have an income tax. Got to get the money from somewhere. But if you're looking for places to improve, there are taxes that you can cut further. On labor market freedom, Texas also ranks 4th, and those are the three variables there. All right, so why does it matter? Why are we talking about economic freedom? Well, there's been hundreds, literally, of studies that look at this, that areas with more economic freedom have a host of positive outcomes. They tend to have higher income, lower income inequality, higher life expectancy, even higher environmental quality, lower unemployment rates, lower infant mortality rates. It's not just about economic growth, it's not just about economics, but things are better when people are more free to pursue their own interests in their own way, absent excessive government intervention. And what I was going to say next was, let's see. I didn't bring any notes up here.
Don't be a slave to the PowerPoint, be free.
All right, so how much I got? 5 minutes? All right, so we got, I can't remember what I just said. Wonderful.
Better life expectancy.
That's right, okay, yeah, so the data, why does economic freedom matter? We live longer, we've got more money, we're happier. And then what I wanted to go into next, which I really do need the slide for, is looking at some of these state results. But I can kind of give you some of them off the top of my head. Number one, when you look at Texas and Florida as the 4 largest states, those two are actually tied for 3rd. And then California and New York are at the bottom, 49th and 50th. Well, if you look at what's happened in the last 5 years on their economies, population has grown twice as fast in Texas and Florida compared to California and New York. If you look at the same thing applies also for job growth, for income growth, all across the board. We have better growth in. Oh, here we go. Okay, thank you. Is someone else advancing it? Oh, wait. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. All right, stop. See, I knew I was going to go to Korea next. I knew it. All right, so listen, here is an example. A lot of you have seen this before, but ultimately these people share the same peninsula, the same geographic area, the same basic natural resources. But this is a night satellite photo in South Korea. It's lit up like a Christmas tree. In North Korea, it's dark except for in the dictator's castle there. And so this is an illustration of why it matters, why these better institutions lead to better outcomes. These people have enough money to turn on their lights. Those people don't. And then I wanted to show you how you see some of the border illustrations here as well. You see Virginia and Tennessee in blue as some of the most free states, neighbored by West Virginia and Kentucky. You see Texas and Arizona bordered by California and New Mexico. You see New Hampshire, where I think there's something going on today, and Vermont and New York, right near each other. There's a wide diversity all across the country in terms of levels of freedom. While overall freedom has been declining in the last 15 years or so here in the U.S., there are some states that are doing better than others. If you look at countries, those in the most free group, quartile, 25%, have much higher incomes than those in the least free. Not a lot of those in the least free are in the developing world, of course, but you see a huge disparity here that illustrates how institutions matter. This is the same slide, essentially, but looking at states. Those in the most free states are about, 7% above their national average, so this lumps in the Canadian and the Mexican states as well. And the least free ones are about 8% below their national average. And I think I'm running out of time, so I'm going to skip through that one. That's just showing the correlation. I already said that, I think. I have a local index, but I wasn't really here to talk about that anyway, so maybe I'll skip through that. Well, let me say a little bit about my local index. I'm going to be coming up with a new one that'll be updated and expanded. But in the one that I published a couple of years ago, which is a little out of date now, Austin ranked 90th out of the 384 metro areas in the U.S. but only 17th out of the 26 areas in Texas. The highest ranked big city or big area in Texas was Dallas, which ranked 26th out of 384. Houston wasn't far behind at 30th. Basically, this was just a localized version of what we just talked about. So same basic methodology, just looking at the more local area. Another reason why it matters, why this economic freedom issue matters, look at the green states, Texas, Florida, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada. Those are the states where personal income migrated. Well, why did it migrate? Because people migrate, right? But this is looking at the income aspect of it. And where did it migrate from? Well, that's the purple states, New York, California. This is basically the inverse of the map we looked at on the cover of the report. The free states are gaining money. The unfree states are losing money. People vote with their feet and with their wallet. Over the last 5 years, Texas ranks number 2 in everything, basically, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Only North Dakota ranks higher, right? North Dakota has had a boom with the natural gas industry and other things, and let's face it, people would rather live in Texas than North Dakota, so you could just stay your number 1 anyway. And then kind of the anti-Texas model, I pulled out the California and New York averages. So on population, Texas has had almost 9% growth over the last 5 years, and it's been below less than half that. In New York and California, employment growth is about 50% more. GDP growth twice as high. Personal income growth is about 50% more. Okay, good. Time up. Good. All right, this is my last thing, and then I'm going to stop. So I want to close with some Adam Smith, the grandfather, or founding father, I guess I should say, of economics. And I hate reading quotes, but oh well. No human wisdom or knowledge could ever be sufficient for the proper performance of the duty of superintending the industry of private people and of directing it toward the employments most suitable to the interests of the society. So in today's terms, you can't do what you're trying to do. Big government trying to direct the economy and pass stimulus packages and regulate people's behavior. Well, you can't do it because you don't know. You don't have the wisdom you need. As Hayek talks about the knowledge problem, which takes us down another road. I'll stop talking. That's why economic freedom matters, though, is because what we're trying to do is the opposite. We're trying to restrict economic freedom, and it doesn't work. All right, I'm done.
Thank you for shifting on the fly there, Dean. You did an admirable job. I am really excited that Jose Torra is with us today. Jose is Dean's counterpart in gathering information for Mexico. And before I read his bio, just very briefly, the thing that struck me about Jose and why I was so excited that he's here today is perhaps he'll share the difficulty that he went through in getting data from the Mexican states that we consider and just take for granted here in the U.S. as far as basic data on government function and spending. In some cases, he had to threaten to sue to get information that you would think is public information. And just the stick-to-itiveness, the persistence that he displayed to get that information so that we have an objective measure of how the states in Mexico stack up against each other in the realm of economic freedom. I am continue to be awestruck by Jose's work in this field. He is the head of research at Caminos de la Libertad. He's a member of the Economic Freedom Network, whose mission is to promote discussion about the different aspects of freedom. He is the author of the book Jonestown, Religión y Socialismo, which is Jonestown, Religion and Socialism. He graduated from La Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico with a degree in economics. Ladies and gentlemen, Jose Torra.
I don't know if I should stand because I'm right in the middle, so I think I might as well just sit down here and so I can see everyone. But well, first of all, I want to thank the TPPF, the O'Neill Center, and of course the Libre Initiative for inviting me here as a speaker. I'm going to speak a bit about transparency and accountability. Mexico is not a great example when it comes to transparency, as Chuck just said. Our National Institute for Transparency and Data Protection was founded in the year 2003 with the Federal Transparency Act. It wasn't until 4 years later when they introduced the changes in the Constitution that make it a right for the people to actually ask for information from the government and to hold them accountable for what they're supposed to do. So when they introduced these changes in the Constitution, I would say that this is about the best thing the Mexican government has done since they granted the central bank its autonomy in 1993. However, it's the Mexican government we're talking about. The most corrupt government among members of the OCDE, according to the most recent Perception of Corruption Index that I think Transparency International puts out just a week ago. And so in the first years of the Institute, 90% of the cases in which the Department of State or office was hiding public information couldn't get a favorable resolution, and the public officers accused were not processed in any way. Plus, the information remained hidden. Of 77 instances where some individual asked for an institution, the institute to sanction someone who was hiding public information, only 9 orders were actually executed. Of the 68 cases in which information could be hidden with impunity, 41 had to be with the Office of the General Prosecutor. And the rest were cases involving CISEN and PFP, that would be the Mexican equivalents of CIA and the FBI. If I could see someone trying to make a case about these agencies and saying, of course, they're hiding information because it's a matter of national security. But we're not talking about public information. No, in this case, we're talking about public information. The taxpayer right to know what the guys who took his money are doing. So they were not asking CISEN to release information on the location of El Chapo or anything like that. They were actually asking more trivial stuff like who paid for the new car of a certain officer of the prosecution, or that kind of spending unrelated to the functions of the actual offices. So the thing is, the most common allegation to get acquitted of those charges was it was a matter of national security. He wants to know where I got my money to buy this car. It's a matter of national security. He wants to know how did I bought this mansion in some of the best neighborhood in Mexico City. It was a matter of national security. Even ranches they have bought in rural Mexico, they always argue that it's a matter of national security, and that's what they're doing to hide this public information. And one of the problems with the Transparency Institute is it was created like most human rights organizations. It has the power to make recommendations, but it cannot send orders or execute its own recommendations. And while some areas of government do comply with the transparency requirements, the Institute is powerless when other department does not want to. So, as Dean showed you in the Ebner report, and you can check the data on the website, the toughest problem in Mexico when it comes to economic freedom is the rule of law. So there's kind of a, how would you say, a correlation. We have these agencies that are the ones that are hiding the most information, and that's where the problem is in the matters of economic freedom. Our justice institutions clearly have a lot to hide. So what does this tell us about economic freedom? All this data hiding. Dean said a lot about room for improvement. And at Caminos de la Libertad, we have a saying that we're always repeating when we're trying to put out all these indices on economic freedom. If you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. If there's not data on something and you cannot know where you're standing, how do you know where you have to go? So the lack of transparency has actually held back the measurements of economic freedom in Mexico. Before the inclusion of the Mexican states in the EFNA index in 2014, there was a previous effort led by a very capable economist from UT, and he tried to undertake this project. He was working along with 2 Mexican assistants, so neither the language or the knowledge was an obstacle for them. Yet they couldn't get very far. Half the data they needed was nowhere to be found. It was hidden 800 miles away south of the Rio Grande in Mexico City. And it would have required them to travel down there and risk it of drinking water and getting sick and all that. And even then, they would have to know where to start looking for it. The data from the national accounting system is a labyrinth of information for which the measurements change its methodology so often it is impossible to make comparisons in decades before 2000. You cannot compare data from the 80s with data from the 90s because the methodologies are so different. And even going back further, it's even harder. It's not like here that you have the BEA that has some sort of consolidated data since, what, 1776? So there's this curious data. In the data from 1987 is just missing. There is no actual figures for anything in national accounting in 1987. What they say is, well, the building of the National Institute of Geography and Statistics burned down and we lost all the... I mean, I found it hard to believe that there was no backup. So, well, there's data printed in different departments in their yearbooks, but it's not data it's data that has never made it online. So, well, but of course, those are issues of government incompetence, not so much of transparency. But it was not a surprise, or at least it was not to me, that some of the departments that were not willing to disclose the public information when we were making the research for the EFNA were the ones that had to do with the labor markets. As you saw in Dean's presentation, one of the components we measure is the labor market freedom and its regulations. So these departments it is one of the worst areas in which Mexican states do, is labor market freedom. So it's rule of law and regulation of labor markets, the huge burden on economic freedom in Mexico. And the departments that have to do with labor freedom, with labor markets, are the ones that were the most unwilling to lend us their information so we could make our measurements. First, I went to the Department of Labor, and I know Chuck likes this story. I was asking them for one data point: the number of unionized workers of each of the now 32 Mexican states. I don't know if you knew, but Mexico City, as of last week, used to be a federal district. Now it's a new state. And, well, it's one of the lowest in our measurement of economic freedom of the Mexican states. So I think it's going to drop even farther because now we're going to have another level of government to pay taxes to. But, well, I went to the Department of Labor. And of course, they have a registry of all the unions and all of the union members because the unions have to report them. So I asked them for the information. Do you have this data on the number of unionized workers of the 32 states? And they told me, no, we don't have it. So I went to the Institute of Transparency because it had proved to be one of the most effective ways to get the information. I asked them, could you please ask for me, this is a request for public information. And they told me, oh, yes, we have it here. You can come pay us a visit. So I went to the Bureau of Labor, and what they told me was amazing. They said, yes, Mr. Toro, we have the information. And they showed me to this place, this large room filled with filing cabinets. And okay, you see those archives? They are full of all the data you need. There are the names of each and every one of the unionized workers, and you can count them one by one, see what states do they work in. Of course, we didn't do it. It was really a large number, and I wouldn't find myself like taking every folder there. But well, we found a way around with measuring it with some polls that the government does. But well, we got the figures on that. And there have been certain problems when it comes to unions. I know most of you have heard of the corruption in the education, the teachers' union in Mexico. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a really sound case because this woman, Elba Ester Gordillo, is one of the most powerful and most corrupt persons in Mexico. And there was this thing that when they asked them to disclose the data from the unionized workers, there were some people that were over 180 years old and were cashing 2 different checks from 2 different schools in 2 different states. So one of the other, I see I have 2 minutes now. So one of the other ones that was really hard to get the data from was the Social Security Institute for the Workers of the State. So I wanted to know their finance accounts for each of the states where they operate. And well, there was this thing where they told me they didn't have their financial states for each state when they have a delegation that has to run. And I didn't just tell them I was going to take them to court. I actually sued them via the Transparency Institute, and after a long lawsuit, we got the data on. The only thing we wanted to know was how much money they were making for workers' contributions. There was not like something that they should hide. That's public information. So, well, I see I have 1 minute now. Well, there's another example of the problems with lack of transparency hidden between the lines of the EFNA, and that's the state of Coahuila that has ranked first among Mexican states in our index for 2 years in a row. And they have this problem. They're the least transparent government in Mexico. And so what happened was they were having all these programs, social programs, where they were handing $100 a month to each and every citizen. And we didn't know what was happening because they were not having that income on taxes. So they were amassing this large debt. And of course, they didn't have to report it because they're the least transparent one. It was a debt of $3 billion, and now they are sunk in debt. And that's why they have had to force some austerity. And well, they've been doing so much better now, but not because they want, but because they were forced to. So, well, in conclusion, because I have just gone 3 minutes over, the transparency is not only important, so we can hold the state accountable of what they're taking and how they're spending. It's also important for research, because research is what gives us a chance of knowing how can we improve in the matters of economic freedom and, of course, then into prosperity.
I can only imagine showing up at that bureau and seeing a room full of filing cabinets, and it's like, gee, I didn't even bring a lunch. Well, next we're going to hear from Ann Beeson. Ann is with the Center for Public Policy Priorities, where she started as executive director in 2013. She is a renowned justice lawyer who's argued twice before the U.S. Supreme Court, which must, I don't know, I'm guessing that's kind of intimidating when you walk up those steps and prepare an argument to be heard by the 9 robed chief or U.S. Supreme Court justices. She's been named as the nation's top lawyer by the American Lawyer magazine and the National Law Journal. Do they ever have a unified title like in heavyweight boxing where they kind of get together and agree? No? Okay. For 12 years, she was the National Associate Legal Director of the American Civil Liberties Union, the Executive Director of U.S. Programs at the Open Society Foundation. She's a Senior Fellow and Lecturer at the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life at the University of Texas. She received her degrees from the University of Texas and obtained her law degree from Emory University School of Law. Ladies and gentlemen, Ann Beeson.
Thanks so much, Chuck, and thanks very much for the invitation. I think it's so important to keep having these open dialogues like we're having here today. I want to start out because I gather that I'm supposed to represent the dollop of disagreement in this conversation, and I'm always happy to play that role. But I thought it was important, especially with this crowd, to establish that I actually also believe in limited government, and in fact, I spent much of my career, as Chuck mentioned, suing federal agencies like the FBI and the CIA and the Department of Justice and the National Security Agency for violating the constitutional rights of Americans. So there's probably more that we can agree on up here than you might think. I do think it's actually... I think it's very important to have strong accountability for government action, and I also think it's very important to have engaged citizens like all of you here today. So thank you for being here and being involved in this important dialogue. I do believe very strongly in democracy, and I believe that democracy means that I also believe in government, and that's where we may start to have some disagreements. I think that the government has an important role to keep us safe and free. I don't think we're going to have a lot of disagreement about that today. I also believe the government has an important role to play in building a strong physical, intellectual, and economic infrastructure so that all Americans and all Texans have the chance to compete and succeed in life. And before, again, we get into these areas where we may disagree a little bit, I actually want to start by saying a few things that I think that we can all agree on, because I think it's important to recognize that many of us are actually trying to achieve the same thing for our state and for our country. We just may disagree about how we get there, okay? I hope we can agree that we should all be helping entrepreneurs and small businesses thrive. That would be a positive thing. We should be building a strong education system that trains students and young people for the jobs of tomorrow. We need to expand opportunity, we need to alleviate poverty, and we need to grow the middle class in this country. I think we should ensure that the Texas economy continues to thrive long term. And I very much agree with the remarks of Jose and others that we need to strengthen transparency laws so that we all know how our tax dollars are being spent and whether they're being spent effectively. So again, I want to start there because those are important areas of agreement, and I think there are some things that we could do together because we agree on those things. Now I want to share a few facts about Texas today, and I'm a very proud Texan, so some of these facts aren't going to be so cheery, and I frankly don't think that they're good enough for our state. So we all know that the Texas economy has been thriving and growing, and that's a very positive thing, and there are good things that the state's doing that have led us in that direction. Unfortunately, too many Texans have not shared in that prosperity, and that's what I want to talk a little bit about. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about these issues, but I want to just start by saying that we have too much poverty nationally and here in Texas. We have too many jobs that don't pay enough for a family to get by and support itself. And we are failing to educate today's children in Texas for the jobs of tomorrow that we need in order for the economy to continue to thrive. Now, let's start with inequality. Unfortunately, our state, our great state of Texas, is among the 10 worst states for income inequality in the nation. And in fact, the Dallas metro area, which is my home city, I live in Austin, but I grew up in Dallas, has the highest level of income inequality between neighborhoods in the country. Again, in my opinion, that is not good enough for Texas. We also have at least, no matter how you count, way too much, a 16% poverty rate, and I don't even want to get into it with Chuck in terms of which poverty rate we're using, because I think what we should do is talk about dollars, okay? We know that 31% of Texas jobs, 31% pay less than $24,000 a year. Now I want to ask all of you, do you think that you could get by and support your family on $24,000 a year? I don't think so, okay? We know that poverty is growing way too rapidly in our big cities, and that's why the mayors of our big cities in Texas have become very concerned about this fact. Between 2000 and 2012, the number of people living in poverty jumped by 82% here in Austin, 64% in Dallas, and 46% in Houston. Poverty in Texas is higher than it was before the recession, and again, that's not good enough for our state. We want to do something about that. Okay, well, let's talk about jobs. It's a very good thing that Texas is good at creating jobs. Of course, we want to create lots of jobs. We've been doing that very well. So why is it that we still have poverty in our state? Well, it's because we happen to have the 10th highest rate of low-wage jobs in the country. And again, to repeat, more than 31% of our jobs pay less than $24,000 a year. And that keeps families struggling no matter what measure you use. Now, what I want to focus on is, okay, well, what are we doing in terms of what kinds of jobs that we're trying to grow here in Texas in order to grow our economy? Well, in fact, we've spent a lot of money and a lot of energy trying to lure businesses from out of state to move to Texas, and we've done that in part by giving them tax breaks, okay? Well, unfortunately, what we know based on a lot of data and a lot of studies is that new jobs are actually created by businesses that start up right here in Texas and that are already present in a state, not by the relocation of businesses from other states. I think we should be growing our homegrown Texas jobs here, and maybe there's something we could do together to help focus on growing jobs here in Texas. In fact, a recent report by CFED ranks Texas very low, 46th among 50 states in business creation, 48th among small business ownership, and 41st in private loans to small businesses. Well, you know what? I think we need better initiatives to grow small businesses and support entrepreneurs right here in Texas, because we have a lot of talent right here in our state. Now, finally, education. Unfortunately, only 34% of Texas adults have an associate's degree or higher. That is not good enough for Texas. We know, based again on many studies, that 62% of our jobs will require a post-secondary degree by the year 2020. That is not very far away. It's coming up very quickly. We have got to do a better job of getting our kids through college. Today, only 16% of boys, this is just an alarming number, and 23% of girls in 8th grade in Texas today will complete any kind of higher education credential. Well, if we are going to try to attract businesses, keep businesses in our state, start new businesses, we have got to do a much better job of moving that number upwards. I hope we can agree on that. Now, how did we get here? And again, I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit more in the Q&A. We got to this situation because of a number of deliberate policy choices that we've made at the city level, the state level, and the national level. And I would say that the title of this great conversation we're having, Economic Freedom versus Government, is a bit of a misnomer, because it is government policy when wealthy corporations get tax breaks and working people don't. That's government policy, okay? And economic freedom is a very good buzzword, but we need to ask ourselves, economic freedom for whom? What is the impact of our current policies on working people? Now, I do want to emphasize in just my last few remarks that I do think that there are some policy choices. There are some things that we could work on that I hope we could agree on. One, again, is to strengthen transparency laws so that we know what the government's doing and we know whether they're doing it well. Another is to boost the ability of entrepreneurs and small business owners to obtain critical early stage capital. And finally, we have got to do a better job of building a strong education to workforce pipeline that connects young people to the jobs that businesses need to have filled. Thanks very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Ann Beeson. Thank you, Ann. For our last panelist, before we go to Q&A, I'd like to introduce Daniel Garza. Daniel is Executive Director of the Libre Initiative. He served as a congressional staff assistant for U.S. Congressman Richard Hastings and was the Deputy Director of External and Intergovernmental Affairs at the Office of the Secretary of the Department of Interior. He was Associate Director of the Office of Public Liaison in the White House, President of Televisa's Hispanic Poder Group, hosted and co-produced Agenda Washington, a news talk show covering the issues impacting the U.S. Hispanic community. But before Daniel comes up, there's a brief video he'd like to display.
My name is Daniel Garza, and my American experience started off here. I grew up picking crops with my family. My parents were immigrants from Mexico with nothing but a 4th grade education. We were so poor. My siblings and I would often miss school to work in the fields. Our home was the size of a tool shed. We had no running water, and what we would do is warm buckets of water on the stove so that when my parents returned from work in the fields, they would bathe with small cups. My father never took welfare because he didn't want to depend on anyone or lose his dignity. He is a proud and noble man.
We can make it with just 3 things. It's God, good credit, and freedom, liberty to work. And that's what the United States is.
You know, I didn't know it at the time, but my father began saving money and buying and selling small properties. He bought a motel with the profit he made. My family and I spent long hours fixing up that motel while still working the fields. My father continued to buy and sell property, and one day he and my mother retired with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of their lives.
If I don't come to the United States, I don't think I have the life that we got right now. Living so good, you know.
My parents' American dream had become a reality. My family and I have succeeded by following the path to freedom. But that path is on the verge of vanishing. What we're starting to see here in America now is a growth in the size and the scope of government that is now starting to look like the governments that we left behind. I'm just torn apart when I see folks who are caught in this dependency that government offers. And not only that, they've condemned their children to a life of mediocrity and subsistence. That this is not the American dream. This is an American nightmare. The Libre Initiative is reaching the Hispanic community before they are lost forever. We know advancing economic freedom is the best way to improve human well-being, especially those at the bottom. And that's our message to the world. You know, one day I was speaking before a group of 150 evangelical Hispanic ministers in South Texas, and a man stood up. He had tears in his eyes and said, you know, I've never heard these things before. Why has nobody told us? Most Hispanics have never even heard about economic freedom, but they know it. Cuba, Venezuela, Mexico, Hispanics leave countries that have been ruined by tyranny to come to America, the land of the free. They don't just believe in the cause, they've lived it. It is a privilege to live in the United States because this is a nation where you dictate your destiny. No other nation has fulfilled more dreams and more aspirations than this country. And to have been born here, I'm just grateful to God for that.
Learn how you can get involved at joinlibre.org.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Brooke and Chuck for allowing us the opportunity to partner up. We are very pleased to partner with such a distinguished organization that already has proven its impact across the state of Texas and across the country. I think, you know, it distinguishes us to partner up in this way. Thank you. Simply, we strive for a free society that is characterized by integrity, respect, responsibility, and toleration. A free society that maximizes peace, civility, and well-being. A free society where everyone is able to express ideas and markets function freely. That's voluntary action and a limited government that is required for that. That's economic freedom. My parents saw America as the promised land. You saw, you know, who they are. They looked at America where they could achieve what they could not achieve in their country of origin. In the small población Garza González, Nuevo León, Mexico. They saw America where they can make life better for their children. And it wasn't because America had more resources or less resources. It's because America had the economic system that allowed them to be free to work, free to seek opportunity. And if they were mistreated in one place, they could leave to another and find other opportunity. Entre parentheses, let me say, I saw my father get fired one day for asking for a raise. The free market system, even though it is the best economic system in the world, will also kick you in the teeth. And it gets a bad name because of that. We have to deal with market forces. That sometimes jobs rise and sometimes they fall. Because of innovation, entire sectors and industries are destroyed, but new ones rise up. And in that whole mix, individuals get tossed up in that. And we have to realize that and be honest with ourselves. And what can we do to actually, you know, make those market forces, to alleviate those market forces sometimes? I think is where I think, you know, we should come together and have honest debate, honest discussion, not shut down debate. My aunts and my uncles came with my parents, and we would migrate through California and Nebraska and the state of Washington. And the thing about that is that today, my aunts and my uncles and my father and mother are part of the 1% wealthiest people in the world. And so are my cousins that came, hundreds of them that came from Mexico. People with fourth grade educations were able to thrive and achieve in America. That's a testament to our free market system. And the fact is, if you make $36,000 a year, according to the World Bank, you too are part of the 1% wealthiest people in the world. And here's the thing about America. Half of the world's 1% reside in America. That's a testament to the free market system. That the market rewards industry, that the market rewards hard work and innovation and self-reliance and personal responsibility. And if the market rewards those things, then shouldn't our social policy induce those kind of virtues and that kind of character in every individual? Shouldn't public policy be advanced to allow people to thrive and to prosper? So then why are we passing policy that induces dependency on government? I don't know of any mother who dreams of their child growing up one day to get on welfare. And yet, that's what we're causing. Right now in the Latino community, half of our children are born out of wedlock. That is not a desirable condition. And our public policy induces that kind of reality. The thing about America is that over 200 million immigrants have come to America. This nation has fulfilled more dreams than any nation on earth. And if they have been able to lift themselves from subsistence and poverty, it's because of the market opportunities. It's because they've accessed the market. But sometimes there are barriers to those opportunities. How much time do I have? 5 minutes? Oh, thank you very much. It's sometimes those barriers are as simple as a driver's license. 70% of Latinos were failing their driver's license in Las Vegas. At the Libre Initiative, we recognize that, and we found that that's a problem. It's not only because you're prohibited from driving from one place to another, because you can't cash checks, you can't fly, you can't do things that we take for granted. And so we mobilized our volunteers, and we put together workshops and training workshops to bring in experts to teach folks about and helping them to pass that driver's license test. Some of our internal research has shown that now 80% of the folks that have taken this thing have passed it. That's a considerable jump. That removes barriers. Did you know that 35% of Latinos do not have a high school diploma? That is a major barrier to opportunity and to the markets. So we've launched the Libre Initiative, a high school equivalency diploma project, where we pay for a curriculum for 3 months, and then we pay for the test for folks to get their GED. Because I stand here today as a recipient of a GED. After the first quarter of the 11th grade, I was called into my counselor's office, and she said, "Kid, when you're here, you show potential, but you're hardly ever here. You're working in Nebraska for a couple of months, you take off to Mexico for 2 months, and then you're working in the fields every other day." And she said, if you go back to Nebraska, or if you go back to Mexico this year, you're not going to pass the 11th grade. And so I asked her, well, what happens next year when I have to do that again? Because I don't get to choose. And she says, well, you're just going to have to keep passing the 11th grade. That was my last day of school. 35% of Latinos do not have a high school diploma. That's a major barrier. I had an uncle. I was fortunate enough I had an uncle, and he begged me to take my GED test, and I took it and I passed it, and it changed my life. It was transformative. And that's what I'm talking about, public policy that can change people's lives. The individual, at the very individual level, and what it can do to people, and open up new roads so that they can better position themselves in the marketplace. And then we can unleash their vast capacities and their skills and the knowledge that they bring and the experiences that they bring. Every one of us has a comparative advantage, a talent that maybe is better than somebody else's. Ms. Beeson talked about inequality. There's a difference in inequalities here. I mean, frankly, there is the government-induced inequality that is induced by trillions of dollars in quantitative easing that centralizes capital on Wall Street, subsidies that go to major corporations that move money away from middle-class taxpayers to large corporations, and there's cronyism that we have to stop. That is government-induced inequality. The kind of inequality that I love is the kind that you earn because of your talent, because of your industry, because of your hard work and your ambition to succeed, because you have produced a product or a service that has made life better for people. And consumers have rewarded you because you fulfilled consumer demand by innovating, by creating new wealth, creating new opportunity. And because you've worked harder, maybe you've achieved more than somebody else. I like that kind of inequality. I don't like government-induced inequality, I'll tell you that right now. So I'd love to work together with the other side and address these issues. And I look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. You know, I'm embarrassed to admit that as a 12-year-old, I went out and harvested raspberries in Washington State for one day, thought I made more money than a prince, and then I only lasted half a day for the second day. It's
hard work,
and I packed it in.
It's hard work.
I couldn't take it anymore. I gave up. So I was a failure at harvesting raspberries. Now that I've got that off my chest, it's time for your questions and their answers. I would ask that if you wish to ask a question, I think we have some microphones, so just raise your hand, wait a little bit for the microphone to get in place, let us know who you are, and then ask a question, and please, no speeches. So, yes.
Hi, Mark Pulliam. This question is for Ann Beeson. If what Texas needs to solve the areas where you think we're not doing well enough is more taxes and more government programs, how can you explain the fact that so many people are leaving California, which has plenty of taxes and plenty of government programs, to move to Texas?
Well, what I would say is that I'm not suggesting that the only answer to our problems is, and I didn't say that actually, is raising taxes. What I am suggesting is that the private sector and the government sector can work together to do some good things, like encourage better connections between high schools and community colleges and businesses. Now, there's one example. Now, the California-Texas thing, I'm sure, is a very complicated sort of story behind that. I've lived in both states myself. I moved here back to Texas from New York. I can't answer specifically the kind of California to Texas story, but what I can say is that we're doing very well at certain things here in the state of Texas, but unfortunately the facts show we aren't doing so well at these other things. I think that a lot of smart minds getting together can actually change the equation, make us not just the best state, according to your economic freedom spectrum, but the best state for working families, the best state for supporting small entrepreneurs, the best state for educating young people and getting them through to college. So that's what I'm asking for.
Question out down front here. Our next question.
Yeah, one back here.
Well, okay, if you wish to be efficient, then we'll do that. Just begin to make your way over here next. All right.
Thanks for the efficiency advice. Mr. Garza, I thoroughly enjoyed what you had to say, but my question is for Ms. Beeson. So I've read that... Congratulations. I've read that the 24,000 figure doesn't actually include the government subsidies, not subsidies, but the help, and I've heard that it's actually up to like $61K for families of 4, so they actually are, I've read that in like Wall Street Journal. Can you address that? Is that accurate? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm happy to get into this, and it sounds like Chuck could jump in too. It's very complicated, and frankly, I'm just going to say, the way we measure poverty is far from perfect. Let's agree on that. We are not doing a good job of measuring poverty, and that's why I don't like to even look at it. I mean, I'm happy to explain the difference between the standard poverty rate and the supplemental poverty rate, but what you need to know is that both of the numbers show that way too many families are living in poverty, okay? Now, how do we define poverty? Well, let's just forget the word poverty for a minute and go back to what I was talking about, which is how much are people making, okay? How much money are people bringing home? 31% of Texans, I cannot say this enough, are making less than $24,000 a year. That's more than the minimum wage. If you make the minimum wage and you work 40 hours a week, you're only gonna bring home $15,000 a year. The point is that this is not enough money to get by, and I don't think there's anybody who would try to claim that it is, okay? We have got to do a better job of raising wages, because it is making money, working hard and making money, we can agree, that is what is going to get people on the path to economic sustainability for themselves and for their families.
If I could say something to that as well. There's a study that shows that 135 million Americans qualify for means-tested welfare programs. 135 million Americans. while 45 million are actually by definition poor. 130, look, I think everybody here agrees that children by their very nature are dependent. And as a society, we will take care of children. I don't care whether the parents are at fault or not. We will take care of children. We will take care of disabled who cannot take care of themselves. We will take care of the senior and the elderly who cannot take care of themselves. But able-bodied folks who can work, we should be focused on creating jobs and opportunity.
Now-
Because at the end of the day, what happens is, it's not so much about the wasted money, it's the wasted lives. Because once somebody gets dependent on government, I think Paul Ryan said it best. Yes, we want to provide a floor for folks who are poor or are needy, but sometimes government nails them to the floor.
Yeah, I actually want to build on this, and actually to address specifically the question about whether or not the benefit of government programs is being included. The supplemental poverty measure is the measure that was created to take account of the impact of those programs. It's still imperfect, but it is the case that unlike the standard poverty measure, the supplemental poverty measure includes benefits like food stamps, for example, that certain families take care of. And it is the case that obviously the official poverty measure is not as high if you look at the supplemental poverty measure versus the standard poverty measure because of that. That's a positive thing. What that means is that those programs are working. It means that those programs are helping lift millions of Americans out of poverty. Now, again, I'm not going to try to persuade you all in this room of the value of all those programs because I know we're going to disagree. But what I will say is that the point of those programs always was to provide a leg up so that families can become more independent. And that is where we need to agree that they need to become more independent. It should be a short-term help. If you're going to provide short-term help, it should be to get people back on their feet so that they can work, so that they can be productive citizens, so that they can make enough money to feed their families. But I do want to say we've got to come up with some plan to raise wages because we're never going to get there. We're never going to be able to eliminate all of those programs until families are making enough money by working 40 hours a week to actually feed their family, pay their rent. We have a tool I want to mention. Go to our website, the Family Budgets tool. What it does, and this goes to Chuck's point of it costs a different amount of money to live in different parts of Texas and the country. And what it does is it takes the real amount of money that it costs to pay rent, pay for childcare, pay for food in a particular place, and then it compares that to the number of jobs in those places in Texas that actually pay enough to meet those basic needs. Forget the poverty measure if you want to, and look instead at that, and it'll be very revealing. It'll say we have a long way to go here in Texas.
Can I follow up briefly? So the 24,000 does not include the cash value of the government benefits, right?
The 24,000 does not include
It's just the
the
wages
cash
and
value.
salary.
Right.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
That's what he asked.
All right.
No, that's right.
We'll get to you next, but the next question here then, so we have efficiency with questioners, right? Clustered together there.
Okay, I'm Bob Parmalee from Georgetown. I just wanted to mention that there's another issue that I haven't heard, and I got here a couple minutes late, so perhaps somebody mentioned it, but there's a federal policy in my position, in my opinion, is suffocating all the states, including Texas, including California, including New York, and I'd say the number one problem with it is corporate income tax rates. And this has been shown directly to lead to companies offloading to places like Ireland and Mexico and China. And there are proposals to cut our corporate income tax to, say, the level of the Republic of Ireland, which is roughly half, I think, of our rate. Can we even think about getting there unless we take action on that?
Dean, this one's made for you.
Sure, yeah. We have the highest corporate income tax rate in the world in terms of the federal rate, and if Bernie Sanders has his way, it's going higher. So no, I think you're onto something there, this notion of these corporate inversions, these corporations fleeing to go to other countries. We can reverse that trend by doing one thing, get rid of the corporate income tax. It's not that hard.
Well, I think one of the reasons also why Texas is doing so well because it has a very low corporate state level tax rate. New York's, I think, is 17%. that is crippling, which is why I think, they're leaving in droves. So I think that has, a lot to do with it. And then, of course, they have the personal income tax, which is about 13%. So you get punished for working in New York or for having an industry or some kind of commercial related industry. That is debilitating to a state right now, especially when they're competing for corporations and citizens.
And the federal tax doesn't bring in that much money, right? People say you can't get rid of it, you're going to lose all this revenue. It doesn't bring in that much money. There's kind of this myth that we're taxing big, greedy corporations. Well, where are they getting the money? They're getting the money from their customers and their shareholders. But there's not just some money tree they're shaking. So getting rid of it would lead to corporations staying here at home rather than going overseas where they have lower tax rates.
What's the federal rate?
Hi, I'm Stacy Hawk. Thank you all for your comments. 2 quick questions. I'm curious if you happen to know the statistics around the percentage of the workforce that is the primary income earner for households compared to that 31%. And then secondly, I'm curious if anyone has thoughts on, I believe it's Finland's new plan to replace their social welfare programs with a basic income and instead providing that cash balance to everyone universally.
Yeah, I don't have the, the figure that I shared is the amount that the jobs pay, right? I don't have the figure that you've asked for. It's probably out there, but I don't have it with me, sorry, yeah.
I think in a world of scarcity, in a world of limited resources, to pay people for not working, for not creating wealth or generating new wealth is perilous and is unsustainable. In this case, it's literally like if a lake, if you could equate it to wealth, what the government is doing is taking 3 buckets of wealth here and then pouring it in this side, as opposed to expanding the wealth and expanding the lake. And if you don't reward hard work, and if you don't reward services and products, that is unsustainable for a society.
The next 2 questions, I think, are efficiently clustered down here.
Chuck, could I say something?
Yes, please, please.
She asked about Finland, and
Yes.
everyone else picked up on that, so I'll touch on that briefly. The way I understand what you're talking about is what we would call a negative income tax, which is a great idea Milton Friedman had, or an idea that the great Milton Friedman had. And essentially what it would do is get rid of all the tax structure, and for those who make income below a certain level, they do, as you described it, they basically get a check from the government. It's an interesting idea. It's hard to imagine how you get there here in the U.S., but it does address, basically it replaces the welfare programs with that one check instead of a million different programs with a million different administrators running them. So it's an interesting idea. I hadn't heard that Finland was doing that. That's
okay.
Sounds like
to borrow from, I'm sorry, I'm Jim Spice from San Antonio. To borrow from Thomas Sowell's recent book on wealth, poverty, and politics, his concept is that human capital is what we need to develop. And so he shows many examples of why demographics, culture, geography prevent you from having the human capital. But obviously in your case, Mr. Garza, your family was exceptional considering how you came to the States. But they were also exceptional in their attitude of work ethic and willing to take on the challenge. And so how do we, other than with public policy and other than just throwing money at an issue with unintended consequences, how do we develop human capital?
One of the areas where I think Ms. Beeson and I agree on is that we have over-criminalized nonviolent activity in the sense that we are crippling our young kids. So in Virginia, a larceny theft of $200 is now qualified as a felony. It's a felony. That's prison time, by the way. Here in Texas, it's $1,500. It's going to be $2,500 next year. So I mean, and it also turns out that in Virginia, the highest incarceration rate of youth is because of theft larceny. Well, it's natural, right? Because the threshold is so low to send somebody to prison. And once somebody goes to prison, they're scarred for life. And we're destroying the future of our young kids by over-criminalizing certain activity. I'm not saying under-criminalize, violent activity. What I'm talking about is non-violent activity. So those are things that we need to look at, and I think reflect on, and make an assessment. Is this in the long term in our benefit, or is it actually perilous for our society and our young kids? And I say it is, and I think that's something that we need to review and look at.
Well, and I would just add on that, I totally agree, that we need to be taking all of the money that we are spending imprisoning and paying for that imprisonment, people for nonviolent offenders, and invest that money in education. It's a much, much better return on investment. I mean, and I would say the same thing about social problems, by the way. I mean, social programs, that's funny. Social programs, which is if we instead invest our money at the front end on the education system, make sure, and also, have governments work with the private sector to build these connections. So we're not just, educating people for jobs that don't exist. We're actually educating people for the jobs that need to get filled, right? Let's do that well, and if we invest, then we don't need to spend any money on government programs because those people will be self-sufficient. And more skills. Yeah, skills training.
I agree with John F. Kennedy, who said our progress in America can only be as speedy as our progress in education.
If we make it quick, we have time for one more interesting question. I know it's going to be interesting right here. Not to put you on the spot, but I know it's going to be an interesting question.
This is for the whole panel. For the past 80 years, courts have really gone out of the business of defending economic freedom and economic liberty. And at the Institute for Justice, we've recognized that this has led to the growth of occupational licensing, something that I'm sure you are all aware of. 1 in 3 people need a permission slip from their government to go to work in the morning. Aside from getting courts back in the business of protecting a right that is really fundamental to our being, what we do to earn a living, what do you think in this state and perhaps in states across the country should be done with this, really the scourge of occupational licensing?
It's just lightning round.
Sure.
Let's go, Dean.
So, well, I'm new to Texas, but I know that in Florida, from whence I came, they're one of the only states in the country that you have to have a license to be an interior designer, which is a bit ridiculous. But ultimately, I believe it's, Vance, I think we had this in our op-ed, I think Texas is ranked 17th in terms of the burdensomeness of the occupational licensing based on the IJ study that you guys did a while back. I mean, and this was looking at low-skilled worker jobs that a low-skilled worker could qualify for. So one way to help with inequality, one way to help low-skilled workers become more successful, more economically prosperous, is to get government out of the way, get all these restrictions out of the way so that people can pursue the occupation that they seek.
Jose, do they have much occupational licensing in Mexico?
Well, not really. I mean, for the things that make sense, like law practice, accountants, medical doctors, engineers, they need to be licensed. But something like a hairdresser, you said?
Interior design. Hairdresser, that too, yeah.
That doesn't make sense at all, I suppose. Why would you need a license?
Jose, I am deeply offended because in Texas, a person who cuts my hair needs as much training as someone who pilots a 747 commercial jet aircraft. 1,500 hours, and this hair is very important to me.
I think 9 times out of 10, you're going to find that licensing is done specifically to keep competition out, to protect a certain sector. Look, I am all about certification. Show that you can do the work, or show that you have the graduate degree or whatever in that field, and you're certified. Another thing is licensing that I think is imposed by government for fees and to keep competition out.
Ann?
I don't have an opinion on this one. I'll let you
Well, ladies and gentlemen, our time together is beginning to come to a close, sadly. I could talk about this stuff and listen to this panel all day long, but I'm sure Brooke would have me do some other work for the foundation. One of the things I think is very important about this discussion, going to a comment or basically Jose's comments about transparency, is we've been beginning to publish information about poverty in America. I had a very interesting email from a couple of professors out of the University of Chicago who said, look, even the government's own statistics on poverty are highly suspect, both the official and the supplemental. And they pointed me to some work that they've done that looked in New York, where according to the supplemental poverty measure, a certain amount of people were on nutritional assistance. Well, they did their own research because food stamps are administered at the state level. It's federal money, but it's administered at the state level. And they found that according to the state of New York itself, they had double the number of food stamp recipients than who self-reported when the U.S. Census Bureau asked them, hey, did you get any food stamps last year? And so what you find is people on government assistance, either because they don't remember or maybe they're operating in the underground economy, they don't actually say, oh yeah, my family's been getting food stamps. And so according to the research out of the University of Chicago, because the Census Bureau bases its poverty statistics on survey information from people who actually fill out surveys and talk with people who talk to them about how much money they made, you're finding that the poor in this country are actually underreporting, probably by half the amount of federal assistance and state assistance they're getting, which of course would fundamentally alter our understanding of poverty in America. And further make it kind of difficult to come up with actual poverty or policy changes because the data is bad. So this is yet another challenge that we have working in this field as we try to expand liberty in Texas and in America, and so doing, expand prosperity in the Lone Star State and America at large. Thank you so much for coming today and for listening to this panel.